Human Rights Watch says a recent Saudi airstrike in the Yemeni town of Mukha that left scores of civilians dead appears to be a war crime. The rights organization said that there was no evident military target at the site of the airstrike. Human Rights Watch said Riyadh has so far failed to look into alleged breaches of the rules of engagements. It said the failure of Saudi Arabia to investigate unlawful airstrikes in Yemen demonstrates the need for the UN Human Rights Council to create a commission of inquiry to investigate allegations of violations by Riyadh. The rights group said 65 civilians, including 10 children, were killed in the air raid on Taiz province on Friday. Some sources put the death toll at more than 140 civilians. Saudi Arabia has been pounding Yemen since March 26. The onslaught has claimed nearly 4,900 Yemeni lives, mostly civilians. Tony Gosling is an investigative journalist who joins us from joins us from Bristol. I apologize for that. Tony Gosling, it's not new news about the types of weapons that are being used, and it emanated from both the United States and the United Kingdom. And this comes from that major sale, for example, that the U.S. made back in 2011 to the UAE, some of them showing in Saudi Arabia, even bunker-busted bombs that are being used in Yemen. The UK also providing some of these bombs. I think the UK has the 500-pound bombs, the bunker-busted bombs 900 pounds, both to be illegal to use in civilian areas. Why is this not being highlighted more?
Well, look, nearly 5,000 dead. That's just an estimate, mostly civilians, and yet hardly a whisper in the Western media about what's going on in Yemen. And I really have to say well done to Human Rights Watch for bringing this up again, because the only thing that's going to stop the slaughter, I think, is pressure from within the West. Certainly the Western governments are not going to act. And we've just heard from that previous report you had there about Human Rights Watch appealing to the United Nations to have an inquiry. Actually, what we really need is action at the level of the Security Council to halt the slaughter. I mean, effectively, what we've got is we've got the richest country in the Arab world attacking the poorest country in the Arab world at the behest of the West. And the Saudi royal family have proved that they are no more Muslim than Bush and Blair are Christians. We seem to be looking at, in the Middle East, a rerun of the devastation caused by the medieval Crusades. And nothing's being done because the British arms manufacturers are profiting, as you've just given examples. So Cameron is completely silent on the war crimes. And over here, it's like a swamp of propaganda. And Yemen hardly features because, you know what, it shows up the West for what they really are, which is backing war crimes of a most horrendous scale. The irony here is that we just had a big speech in Britain from David Cameron, the Prime Minister, last week, talking about extremists here in Britain, which has been roundly criticised. I mean, particularly by Nafeez Ahmed, who's done a brilliant article, which is an open letter to David Cameron, Britain's most dangerous, violent extremist. And in the meantime, we're being shown that the British government is supporting mass slaughter of civilians. So Cameron is a complete hypocrite, and the only thing that's going to make any difference, as far as I can see, is pressure at the from human rights groups and NGOs within the West, and news organisations, by the way, properly reporting this, as well as at the UN Security Council level.
Well, I'd like to correct you in terms of the UN Security Council, because they did act and they placed the country under I think it was an arms embargo, and that was Yemen. So the country that's being bombed is being put on the UN resolution, but not the country that's bombing it.
Well, I'll tell you what, this gives you such a brilliant example of the propaganda and censorship here right across the Western world. Because what's happening in Yemen, they really don't want to know, because what it does is it opens up a Pandora's box of hypocrisy. The West is supporting Al-Qaeda and ISIS in Yemen. Actually, effectively, the Gulf states are becoming, or have already maybe become, as well as ISIS, a kind of US franchise. I mean, look, for example, at the Saudi embassy a few months ago in Yemen, where the Houthi rebels found Israeli weapons in there. So there's a real deep hypocrisy about what's going on in Yemen, never mind the 5,000 people slaughtered. And that's why there's the propaganda, because they don't want the Western people to know. The Western media's really got to step up to the plate here, and maybe they should switch Press TV back on in Britain so that people can understand what's really going on in our name and with our money.
Thank you very much for that. Investigative journalist Tony Gosling there from Bristol.